Hilches Zchiah U'Matanah Perek Shishi. Now we learned that dvarim shebelev einam dvarim. So when a person does a ma'aseh kinyan or other ma'aseh would make shachales, and he's tiny that believe he had this and this das, so we don't rechenzach with the das shebelev, we rechenzach with the das of how he expressed himself. However, there's certain times when it's muchach or it's so clear that this is his das, so even though he didn't say it clearly, but nevertheless we go basan oimed. That's like called dvarim shebelibe belev kolodim. Everyone understands that that's his das. So b'chiyah gavna, it's not considered a chsarn of dvarim shebelev no dvarim. You have to know exactly when that's considered. We had before when a person that wanted to go to Eretz Yisrael and he sold his nechosim, and it was considered dvarim shebelev einam dvarim. So that wasn't considered b'das or b'das kolodim. But I'll call upon him. That's the nekud of this halacha. Perek shishi. La'olam oimdim das hanoisen. We assess the das hanoisen. Im hoyu advarim marim sev daite. If it was mare that this is really what he ultimately meant, even though he didn't say it, is oisen al pi oimed, we do according to the assessment, even though he didn't say it. Even though since it's something we know that, or we assume that the pashtus is this is what he meant. And afal pishali pirish, even though he didn't say clearly, he didn't articulate. Ketzad. Mi shaholach b'nei lemdinas hayam. A person has one son, and this son goes lemdinas hayam, and v'shama shemes. He heard that this child died, and lepel he went ahead because of kol nechosav la'acher. He went and gave a present, all his nechosim, to someone else. Matana gluya gemura. He gave a complete matana gluya gemura to someone else. And lepel v'achar kach bo b'nei, and then his son comes. So the din is a matanos kayim. Is that matana is not kayim? Why? Because shadvarim mechichim is very clear. She'ilu yada shebnei kayim. Had he known that his son is still alive, leihoya nesen kol nechasav. He would have never given all his nechasav to this other person. And the fact that he gave the nechasim to the other person is only because he thought that his son is no longer alive, so there's no one to yashin him, and therefore he gave this nechasim to another person. Lefichach im shir min nechasim kalshu. If he didn't give all his nechasim to someone else, he left some of his nechasim, he retained some of the nechasim, ben karka ben metaltlum, whether it's karka or metaltlum, so then matanas kayamas, because he didn't give away all his nechasim. Whereas he was leaving some of the nechasim just in case his son is alive, so Mamela he's leaving some nechasim for his son. And therefore we're saying that he didn't, whereas in the case where he gave all the nechasim away, so the pshat is that there was no place in his mind that his son is alive. Mamela he was assuming his son is no longer alive, and he gave everything away. Masha'inkin, when a person is leaving some of the nechasim behind, so it means that in his mind he thinks that maybe his son is alive, and from deswegen he's giving away the nechasim. So therefore this matana is kayam even if lepel the son was alive. Now this din that a person, if he gave all his nechasim away, he heard that his son died, and then he gave all his nechasim away. So we say that if his son was really alive, so then the matana is bottled. Masha'inkin, in a case where he left some of the nechasim for him, he left some of the nechasim that he didn't give it away. So then, even if he finds that the son is alive, so the matana is chal. That's what we learned over here in Halach Aleph. So the Ramah brings from Achreinim that this din is only by a matna shchiv mira. Because by a matna shchiv mira, the matana is only going to be chal la'achar misa. So at this point in time, even though he gave the matana, he gave all his nechasim, some of his nechasim, either way, he has access to all the nechasim, he can use all the nechasim. Question is only what's going to happen after he dies. So we say, if he gave away all his nechasim, so obviously he wasn't worrying about his son, he gave away all his nechasim for la'achar misa, so the only reason why he wasn't worrying about his son, because he assumed his son died. Mashenki, now that he realizes his son didn't die, so Mamela, that matana becomes bottled. That matana is bottled. Masha'inkin, if a person left some of the nechasim, he didn't give all of it away from matana shchiv mirah, so then obviously he was also entertaining the possibility that his son didn't die, and that's why he's leaving him some nechasim. So therefore, since he gave this matana away, entertaining the possibility that his son didn't die, so when he finds out Taka his son didn't die, but nevertheless the matana is kaim. That's the halacha that we learn in Halach Aleph. But b'medvar mamurim, when we're dealing with a matana shchiv mirah, so there's a matna shchiv mirah, he's not worrying about himself at all, because lepel, until he dies, he has all the nechasim. The question is only what's going to happen after he dies. So we say that since he thought that there was no son, so maybe he gave it away. Once he realized there's a son, he didn't want to give all away. But what we're talking about a matnas bari, in the case of a matnas bari, a person has nechasim, and then he heard that his son died, and then he went ahead and gave away all his nechasim to somebody. Now the question is, he gave away all his nechasim, what's going to be with him? So obviously, for some reason or another, he's not worrying about himself. He's not worrying about himself despite the fact that he gave away all his nechasim. So then we could assume that just like he's not worrying about himself, he's not worrying about his son. So therefore, even if he gave away all his nechasim, he knows he heard his son died, and he gave away all his nechasim, and Lepel later on he found out that his son is alive, so even in such a case, we say that the matana is kaim. That's what he brings from the Achreinim. The Rambam doesn't say that clearly. The Rambam doesn't say that this din is only talking about matana shchivmira. He's only talking about matana shchivmira. But I'll call upon him, that's how he brings B'Shem. He brings from the Gra, from the Aruch HaShulchan, others that say that this din of halacha, that this halacha in Rambam is only talking about in a case when it's a matnas shchivmira, not a matnas bari. Halacha base. V'chein, hakosev kol nechosav matana lechem mibanim. It's again another example of a situation where a person writes something, and the pastors, if you read the writing, you assume one thing, but Chazal are telling us that the Oim Das is not like that. The Oim Das is not like that. A person has a number of sons, and he goes ahead and writes all his nechosim that he wants to gift all his nechosim to one of these sons. Ben Shahayibari, Ben Shahayishchivmira, whether this person, the father that's dying, that died eventually, was a bari or a shchivmira. And afilo haya ben cotton hamutal baris, it was a little child that was lying in a crib. Is nevertheless we assume leaso el apetrupus. We don't take for granted. The way he wrote the shtar was he's giving away all his nechasim. He has a number of sons, and he's giving away all his nechasim to one of these sons. That's what he wrote. And this one son could be someone that's really not shaykhs to be at this point in time responsible. He's a little baby. He's in a crib. But nevertheless, Chazal say we assume that he didn't really mean to gift it to one son. We assume he wanted only that this son should be in charge. Really, it should belong to all of them, but he should be the one that should be in charge, or he should be the apotropos. Liaso el apotropos, and therefore v'hareu b'chol ha'nechasim ke'echad mi'echav. He's like one of the brothers. He doesn't own any more in the inheritance than the rest of the brothers. Umdun dasenhu shalinischaven elalias echav nishmoinle. The umdun das, the svara is that he didn't really want to give it away to the son. He just wanted that the other brothers should listen to him. That's talking about if he said all his nechasim belong to one. However, v'mshir kolshu, if he left over part of the nechasim, he said, L'mashal, he owns a lot of assets, and he says all of these assets should belong to one of the sons, and only a small asset should belong to the other sons. It ben karka, whatever shir kolshu ben karka ben metaltalin. So then zocha ben matana, the matana that he gave to one of the sons, becomes taka his, and the other sons only yarshin, this part that he left over. Now, by medvar mamurim, this din that when there's a number of sons and he gifted all his assets to one of the sons, it goes to we say that son is not really, knows he didn't really want to take away the Yerusha from the other sons, but rather he wanted only that this son should be an apotropos. That's only when we're talking about bein abonim. So in other words, he has his Yorshim abonim, are sons, and it's a bein abonim, there's a number of sons, and he's giving one of the sons all his inheritance, all his assets. So we say that he doesn't really want to give him all his assets, he only wants, he should be the apotropos. Avalim kosev kol nechosev leben ben abonis. He has not only abonim, he has daughters. Now we're talking about daughters b'chlal don't yarshin bein abonim. In other words, if there's a son and there's daughters, they don't yarshin. But it would mean, let's say he had sons, he had a number of sons, and those sons died, and now they left over daughters. So the din is l'mashal, a person, let's say, had two sons or three sons, makes no difference, and lepel, one of the sons died, so there's one son still alive, and the other son died, and he left over a daughter. So this daughter shares the Yerusha with her uncle, because lepel, she's the inheritor of this son. In other words, if the son left over a son, so again, the son is the Yerush of the son, which is Yashing the Zayda. Masha'inkin, if L'moshel, there was Yankov. Yankov left over, had Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. And Reuven is still alive, and Shimon and Levi both died, and Shimon and Levi, each one had a daughter. So Reuven, and the daughter of Shimon and the daughter of Levi, they Yashin the Yerusha. Each one gets a third. So in such a case, when it's a Ben Abonis, and he says he's gifting it all to Reuven, as opposed to Shimon and Levi's daughters, so then the Yerusha is Chal, the Matana is Chal, and it belongs to Reuven. That's this din. We assume that a person is not taking it away from the Bonim, and he's not giving it to the Ben Habonim. We assume that. But She'ein Kain, if it's Ben Habonis, even though they're all Yarshim, so then we don't assume that he's not gifting it to the Ben Habonis. And Al Derazeh, we're not assuming that he's not gifting it to the Bas Habonis. Somewhere or another, to take it away from the Bonim, so we assume he's not taking it away. But to take it away from the Bonis, or from the Bonis Ben Habonim, or the Bonis Ben Habonis, all of these, we don't assume that. That's what he's saying. B'med dvarim amurim shekosav lebein Ben Habonim. Avolim kosav kol nechosav lebein Ben Habonis. There was a son and a number of girls that were his nieces that were yarshting together. Oy lebaz Ben Habonis, there were a number of bonis that were yarshting together. Oy le'echad mara yarshim, there'd be other yarshim, the uncles, brothers, whatever. Ben sh'ar yarshim is afal pishali shir klum, even though he gave everything away to one of the yarshim. So then it's matanosi klum. So this din that le'eso el apetrupis is only exclusively to a Ben Habonis. Now another din, halacha dalet, v'chein, hakesev kol nechasi leishtei. A person has yorshim. His wife is not a yerish, so a wife is entitled to a ksuba, but she's not a yerish. But he went ahead and he wrote all his assets to his wife, ben bori ben shchivmira, whether he was healthy or he was a shchivmira. Is afal pishakona miyodi. He didn't only write it and made a ma'aser kinyan. So we assume le'aso ela petrupal yershav. We assume that he wasn't really gifting his assets to his wife. We assume that she was only to be in charge. She was not petrupis on the nechasim of the yershav. Ben shahar yershav bonov mimena, whether the children that he had, which were yashning him, were her children, or children from another wife. They weren't his children. Maybe he didn't have any children, and his yarshim are his brothers, ishar yarshim, or he has other brothers. So we assume that when a person writes all his assets to his wife, and lepel he has other yarshim, we assume that he doesn't really want to give his assets to his wife. We assume that he's only appointing her as being the apetrupis for the yarshim that are going to yarshim. That's only talking about when he gave her all his nechasim. However, v'imshir kolshu, he left over some of the nechasim. In other words, he said that 90% of the nechasim should go to his wife, and 10% should go to the yarshim, or whatever, even a 1%, a little bit. But as long as he's not giving all of it to his wife, so then we say whatever he gave to his wife, she taka received as a gift, and that gift is a valid gift, is a good gift. V'imshir kolshu, he left over some of the nechasim that he wasn't gifting to his wife. Ben karka ben metalton, and then konsa kol shekosuvlo. Now, b'medvar mamurin, that we assume that he's not really giving to her as a gift, but he's rather only appointing her as an apetrupis, is benasua, when she was his married in the eifon of nesuin. It wasn't only erisin, it was nesuin. So she was his wife, proper wife. Avulum kosav kol nechosav liishti arusa. In other words, it's a wife that's not really a nesua. They just got married. There was kedushin, but there was no nesuin yet. So Memele, there wasn't that kiruv between the husband and wife yet. Grusha, or it was his wife, originally was his wife, but now he divorced her. Is aval pishali shir klum, is arei kishar b'nei adam matanosi kayamas. Over here, fakert. Whereas the fact that she's further from him causes that the matana should be kayamas. In other words, when a person has a wife that he's married to, and not stam arusa, but nesua, so then we could assume that he trusts her, and therefore he wants her to be the apetrupis, and therefore, even though he wrote that she should be the balabas, but he really meant that she should be the apetrupis. Masha'inkin, if it's his wife that's not a nesua, or it's a grusha, he divorced her already, so then the pashtus is not interested in her being the apetrupis. So elamai, so why is he gifting her this money? He's gifting her because he wants to gift her, whatever reason. So just like if he would gift stam a person, someone that's not married to her, someone that's no connection to him. So if he'd give a gift, so obviously that gift would be a good gift. So al derazeh, if he gives it to this wife, which is not his wife, a nesua, presently married to her, fully married, so then it would also be a good gift. It's just when she's a nesua, so it's fakert. Because of the closeness, so we assume that he wants her to be the apetrupis, and therefore, even though he wrote her to be giving her a gift, we assume that she's only the apotropos. There's nachama. When a person gives a gift of all his nechasim to his wife, so then we assume that she's only the apotropos. That's only talking about a wife that's presently his wife and a nesua. Mashenkin, if she's an arusa or she's a grusha, that wouldn't be the din, then she would receive the present. That's din number one. And if what happens, he didn't write everything to her, he left something over for the yarshim, so again, everything he wrote to her, even if she's a nesua, belongs to her, and the yarshim, the yarshim. Halacha vov. Hakoisev kol nechasav le'echad mibanav ula'acher. So we learned before that if a person writes all his assets to one of his sons, so we assume that he is a yorish. I'm sorry, he is a apotropos. He doesn't really receive it. He's only the apotropos over the other sons. Now, if a person writes all his nechasim to someone else, to a stranger, so then we assume that that gift is a proper gift. Now, what happens if in one shtar he writes all his nechasim to a son and to a stranger? And Alderazah will have a situation where he writes it to his wife and to a stranger. So over here we say that the stranger, so basically he's giving half to one and half to the other. So the stranger gets what he gets, and the son or the wife deals with it as if he would have given her everything. Halacha vov. Hakesev kol nechasav le'echad mibanav la'acher. He writes all his nechasim to one of his sons and to someone else. Izeo acher kan nechasim anechasim matana. So the other person, he's the one that receives half of the nechasim as a present. And v'nishir achetzi lebanav. So the other half is left for the sons. And now this is all the assets. This is all the assets. So the rule is when you give all the assets to a son, so he's only apotropos. We only assume that he's an apotropos al sharechav. And that same din, Allah Chazayin, v'cheinim kasav kol nechasav li'ishtei u'le'acher. He writes in one star that his wife plus someone else should become the recipient of all his nechasim. Izeh acher, the other person is taka kana mefze. He's taka receive halves of it. Aber v'ishtei, since she's becoming the recipient of all the rest of the nechasim, so therefore, apotrupa al mechsa, she's only an apotrupa al mechsa. She doesn't receive it, like we said before. That when a person gifts all his nechasim to his wife, we can assume that she's only apotrupas and she's not the recipient of this gift. Halacha ches. Now, kol isha shekonsa kol nichse ba'il matana. We said before that there could be a hechatimtza of a woman, let's say if she's a grusha or she's an arusa, that the husband gave her all the nechasim, and the taka became hers. She doesn't become just an apotropos, it actually becomes hers. Now Lepel, she's a woman that also has a ksuba. She's entitled to a ksuba from her husband or from her husband's assets. And now he gifted all these nechasim to this woman, to his wife. So the question is, Lepel azes, she has all the nechasim. But the Maisa is we're soon going to have a case where she's going to lose the nechasim. In other words, the balchayv of the husband is going to come and take away these nechasim from her. So she now is left without a ksuba. She has no ksuba. Now the din is that when a person writes this type of a shtar, so all the nechasim that are here now are included in that shtar. But any nechasim that was accumulated later, let's say on Shchedesh Nisan, a man writes a shtar to his wife of kol nechasim, and Mamela he gave her all his nechasim, and Lepeil, and she was entitled to those nechasim because she was an arusa or she was a grusha, and Lepeil between Shchedesh Nisan and Shchedesh Iyar he accumulated more nechasim, and then he died on Shchedesh Iyar, so she ends up having all these nechasim, and Lepeil there's more nechasim that goes to the Yorshim. Now she goes ahead and she has all these nechasim, but all these nechasim were taken away from her. Why were they taken away from her? Because there were people that the husband owed money to, and Lepel, since she was the one that was received as a gift from her husband, these nechasim, so Memela, a gift that was given to her husband, there's a lien from other debtors, from other creditors, and Memela, so they come and take away from her nechasim. She's left without anything. But now she says, listen, you gave me a big gift. She got a big gift from her husband. But Lepel, she's left with nothing. And she has a ksuba. So what's going to be with her ksuba? So we say no. Because since she, Lepel, got a gift, and that getting a gift is something which was so important to her that she received this gift. So at that point in time, when she received the gift, she forfeited her ksuba. And even though later on this gift will really be taken away from her, but lepel, she can't go ahead and reclaim her ksuba. That's this din. Kol isha, alochaches, kol isha, shekonsa kol nichse bayil matana. She received all her husband's assets matana. So the din is ibda ksubasa, she loses her ksuba. V'tikare could be torn up, lefichach. Im yotza of shtar chayv, if later on a shtar chayv came out against those nechosim, which she received as a gift, and v'holchu kol nechosim b'chayv shekadma matana, and now they went ahead, those bali chayv went ahead and took away those nechosim, because they were there before she received the gift, is to sure he b'lei klum, she remains without anything. And v'lei tikach b'ksubasa shekadma chayv, and she doesn't take anything for a ksuba which really came before the chayv. She knows she had a ksuba, and that ksuba really was before the chayv. So l'chura be'emes, she's entitled to the ksuba, and she really should get the. Knows this karka which she got as a gift from her husband was there was a lien of bali chayv, but there was also her lien, and her lien really was before the bali chayv. So what's happening is that she received it as a present. Now the bali chayv are coming along and taking away these karka from her, and now she's left with nothing. So the chumash should go and say, 1 second, you're taking away this karka from me because you have a chayv, but I have an earlier chayv than you. My chayv comes before yours because I was the ksuba, we got married before this debt. So memelu l'chura, I'm entitled to this karka. So we say no. When she received this achidush over here, when she received the karka, she, so to speak, was mevater. She forfeited her schus to the ksuba, even though now she's really left with nothing. But that hanoah that she had, that her husband gifted her, so that's considered something which for that she was willing to mevater in the ksuba. And lepel, she's going to end up with nothing. There's this umdandas shebahanoah shebolo bishmua zu. The hanoah that she had when this news shekasiv lakom nechasim, that her husband wrote all his nechasim to her, and lepel at that point in time it was a proper gift. The gift was chal. Is ibda kol schus sheyesh lo b'nechasim chutz matana zu. So as a result of that, she loses any rights she has on these nechasim except for this matana, and therefore, even though right now lepel these nechasim were taken away from her, but she can't go ahead and reclaim it based on the ksuba, because the ksuba she forfeited the ksuba. Is again when a woman gets all the nechasim from her husband, and lepel at that point in time she loses a ksuba. So even if later on she ends up losing those nechasim, and lepel, her rights to the ksuba came really before the balchev, which really took away these nechasim. But nevertheless, we assume that once she received this gift, she was mevater on her ksuba, and memela the ksuba is batal. V'chein hakoisev halachates. V'chein hakoisev nechasim lebanav. A person writes all his nechasim to his children, bein scharim bein nekeves, whether he's writing it to his children, to his sons, daughters, bein bari bein shchivmira. He's writing, knows he's gifting his nechasim to his children. Rather than having an inheritance, he's gifting his nechasim to his children. Let's say he wants his daughters also to get part of the nechasim. So if he's not going to gift it, so only the sons are going to get, because only the sons yarshin. So he's going ahead and he's dividing his assets and he's gifting it to the sons and to the daughters. And he's either he's healthy or he's a shchivmira. And v'kasav li'ishte imoin karka kolshu. And amongst the gifts that he was giving to his children, and to his daughters, he also gave a piece of land to his wife. Is hail va'asa oisen shutfim ben abonim. So now, since he made her into one of the yarshim, that she's part of the, so to speak, the people that are receiving his inheritance, even though really she's not entitled to inheritance, she's entitled to a ksuba. Abalepel, he made her into a shuta ben abonim, v'lei michaso, and she wasn't meicha. In other words, l'chur, she could say, listen, this piece of karka is very nice. I'm very happy to get this piece of karka that he's gifting me, but he really owes me a ksuba of a lot more money, and I don't want this piece of karka to be the mimkei maksuba. In other words, I don't want this piece of, the fact that he's giving me this this piece of karka should be in order that I shouldn't be able to get a ksuba from it. But lepel, she wasn't meicha, she didn't object. So the din is that since she received this gift, and while she received this gift, she didn't object in saying that this gift shouldn't replace the ksuba, is ibda ksubasa, she loses her rights to the ksuba. Ve'ena tirefes min nechasim elu klum, and all these nechasim that he gifted together with her, nechasim that he gifted her, she doesn't take anything from that. However, in those he did this, he could have done this while he was still alive, and after that he had more nechasim. Avol nechasim sheyavelu acher elu is netelas mem ksubasa. Let's say this was done on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. He went ahead and he gifted all his sons and his daughters nechasim, and he gave also his wife. So, and she didn't object. So we assume that this, what she received, is bimka. So not bimkem de ksuba. It's not bimkem de ksuba. It's be'emes. What's happening is that she's being mevater on her schus to be gave a ksuba from the other nechasim that he gifted. Whereas he gifted her and he gifted them. And Memela, she's so happy that he gifted her together with them. So Memela, she's being mevater on her schus to claim the ksuba from them. But that's only to claim the ksuba from that money that he gifted together with the money he gifted her. Masha'inkin, any money that he earned or he received after that happened, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, he did all this. And then between Rosh Chodesh Nisan and whatever further, he earned more money. And then he died. So then she's entitled to receive her ksuba from that money that he earned after he died. I mean, after he gave this gift. That's what he's saying. Because she's not being mevater on the ksuba. She's only being mevater on her schus to mon the ksuba from these nechasim. But from the chasim that he will receive after these nechasim is nitelas mehem ksubasa. So then he could take this up. Halacha Yud. Kosev lo imoyin metaltlon bevad, because he was dividing his nechasim amongst his children, and he didn't leave her a piece of karka. He left her only metaltlon. So that's not really so choshev. So for that, she's not willing to be mevater her schus to mon the ksuba from their nechasim. Again, she's not being mevater on her ksuba. It's only that she's being mevater her right to mon the nechasim from these karka, from these children. So she received karka together with them. So therefore, she's willing to be mevater that she doesn't have a schus to be tiveya the ksuba from the karka that he gave to these bonim. Masha'inken, if he only gave her metaltalin, so that's not enough for her to be so happy about and be mevater. That's din number one. Oi sheshir la'atzmi karka kolshu. The case before was he gave all his nechasim and he gave to his sons or his daughters and also to her. And Memela, so Kila, there was nothing left, and we're saying she's being mevater from being able to give her ksuba from these nechasim that these people received together with her, only if she received karka. But what happens if he left himself some of the karka? So if he left himself some of the karka, so basically he's leaving a place for her to be able to be geva. In other words, she's not being mevater her whole schus of being geva, because he's leaving karka for himself, and for that she'll be able to give her a ksuba. So once she's able to be geva the ksuba from this karka that he left for himself, so we assume that she'll also be able to be geva the ksuba from all the karka that he distributed. That's this then. If he only wrote a metaltlum, that's one case. So in either case, it's ksubasa kayemas, and ksubasa kayemas doesn't mean obviously ksubasa kayemas. It means ksubasa kayemas, and she could mon from the other bonim that received karka, she can mon from them. Now, that's the number one. Then the Rambam says v'takonas hagenim shafilu shir metaltlum. Even if he left metaltlum kolshu, so it's also she could go ahead and mon sai from these metaltalin, and also from the bonim, because the din is meikar the din. There's no shibur on the din of the Gemara. There's no shibur on metaltalin. There's only shibur on karka. Masha'inkim medinas hageinim, so there's a shibur on metaltalin as well. Before takonas hageinim, once he distributes all his karka, so basically he didn't leave her anything to be gave her a shibud from. And therefore she was mevater because she received karka, they received karka. She was mevater on the shibud only on karka that he acquires later. So then her shibud is reinstated because she wasn't mevater on the ksuba. She was only mevater on the shibud. That's only talking about masha'inkin if he left for himself karka. So maybe he left for himself something that she should have a shibud on. Once she has a shibud on the karka, he has a shibud also on the karka that he distributed to the bonim. Masha'inkin metaltalin, she doesn't have a shibra metaltalim because there's no shibra metaltalim. But once the Goinim instituted that there is a shibra metaltalim, so now the din becomes that even if he left himself metaltalin, so basically even though he distributed all his nechasim, but he left metaltalin, so memela there is still a shibud that was left for her to be geva her ksuba from. So once she's gave her ksuba from these metaltalin, so she can be gave also from the rest of the karkois as well. That's this. Even if he only left metaltalin, is also she could be gave her from all the nechasim, the nechasim that the other bonim and bonis received. Sharia meres mash shir and he gave it. What he left over and he gave it because that's takonas ageinim. Once she's already being gave, she's not being mavatar on everything at this point in time. Is memela tered l'shar nechasim v'tisef. So memela, that's how she could also be tered l'shar nechasim, which is really the havana of why bashir karka she could be given from everything. But normally bashir metaltum she cannot. But after takonas hagoinim, that then applies also bashir metaltum. Yeah. Hakosev kol nechasim l'bonim. A person writes his children all his nechasim, and lepel v'kosev li'ishtei chelik imoyim, and he wrote also for his wife a chelik of these nechasim, and as a result of that, she was mavated the schus to be able to be giver from these children that received the nechasim, and lepel umes echad min abonim b'chai yoviv, and one of these sons died b'chai yoviv, and the father yashid him. So now this karka that he gave to the ben, which he gifted to him b'chai yoviv, so now went back to the father. So the din is areza tigbek ksubasim the chelik zeshemes. So she could go ahead and be giver her ksuba from this chelik. She'll leave the ksubasa lemituf mihen. She was never mavater on the karka. She didn't mean to say that this karka she can't be teir from. Meant to say she won't be teir from these yisaimim which received the gifts together with her. Mashenkin, now that this yosem died and lepel, this karka went back to his father, so then she could go ahead and collect the chay from the ksuba from the father. Halacha Yud Beis. A woman once she gets married, and she doesn't. When a woman gets married, so all her nechasim, so either she gives it to her husband, that's nichsit barzel, or even the nechasim that are actually hers that she doesn't give to her husband. But lepel, those nechasim, the husband has a right to have the payers from those nechasim, and any benefit that there is from those nechasim belong to the husband. That's the din of nichse maluk. Now she doesn't want her husband to have benefit, and she doesn't want also her husband maybe to yarshin nechasim. In other words, the din is that a woman has nechasim, so and she dies, so the husband yarshins the nechasim. So then is a haretzer linase, and because for kol nechaseh she wrote all her nechasim bein libno, she wrote it away for her son, or bein la'acher, or for someone else, and v'achar kach nisis, and then she got married, and v'nizgarsha, and then she got divorced. Eshamez baila, her husband died. So the din is she gave away all the nechasim already to her son or to someone. So the din is matanasi b'teila. The matana is bottle. Why? Because we understand that she's not really giving away these nechasim because she wants to give it to this person she's giving it to. She's trying to keep these nechasim away from her husband. Matanasi b'teila shezum avrachasi. She's trying to keep away the nechasim from her husband. For the kosvil kol nechasel, the only reason why she wrote all her assets to someone, ela lahavriach mibayla, to keep it away from her husband, shalei yirashana, he shouldn't be the one that yashes her. That if she dies, it shouldn't go to him, it should go to her son or to whoever else it is. And also, ukshatia tzrichalen, and then when she's going to want these nechasim, is yavzerle, they should come back to her. In other words, if she gets divorced or he dies, she wants to be able to have these nechasim back. Lefichach im meisehi b'chaya baila. If lepil, she actually died b'chaya baila, so again, it's not the husband's because she gave it away. Is the din is kana mekabel matanis hakel. Then the recipient, Taka receives it, becomes his. So a woman is getting married, she owns nechasim, she doesn't want her husband to have access to those nechasim. She doesn't want, if she dies, her husband should yashim the nechasim. He doesn't want even right now that he should be echel peiros from those nechasim. So Memela, the Ram does mention that, but so Lepel, she went ahead and gave it as a matana. So the matana is not a matana that she's giving it away, and if she's going to want it back, she's not going to get it back. If she gets divorced or her husband dies, so she takes back the nechasim. However, if she taka dies, and she dies, so she's not taking back the nechasim anymore, so then the person that she gave the nechasim to becomes the recipient. However, v'mshir klum, if she didn't give all the nechasim away to someone, she left some of the nechasim for herself, afilu metaltalin, so then matanose kayemes, so then we assume that her matana is proper matana, v'afal pishin is gar she'ein chizer. So a woman owns property, or owns whatever she owns, and even metaltalin. And lepel, she gives away all her nechasim to someone before she gets married, so then when she gets divorced, she could take all of nechasim back. Masha'enkin, if she owns nechasim and she gives a good part of those nechasim away, and she leaves a little bit over, and that she goes into the marriage with, so then if she gets divorced, she can go ahead and take those nechasim back. Halacha Yud Gimel. Kol hanoisten kol nichseim, those people that give away all their assets, is mishati bottle matana. Once that matana becomes bottle, and v'yachzru kol hanechasim l'baylim rishenim, ena makabel matana machzer peiris. This woman gave away all her assets to someone, and that was in order to avoid her husband getting it. And now she got divorced, so now she's taking all her assets back. So now she can't say, now listen, all the peiris you ate in the interim between my marriage and my divorce, I want back. That belongs to the makabel. Ena makabel matana machzer peiris. For him, even if a person clearly said, I'm giving you a matana on the condition that you'll have to return it to me at a certain point in time, at the end of someone's life, so over here also the same thing. In other words, since she gave a matana, it's clearly understood that the matana is only as long as she doesn't want the matana back. In other words, she's not going to get divorced or her husband dies. So either way, she wants this matana back, so she's entitled to the matana back. But on the other hand, the peiris that this person, the recipient of the matana, ate, it's as if she would have said, "I'm giving you a matana as long as my husband's alive." So the mele, any peiris that this recipient ate is his, even though at the end, once the husband dies, so he has to give it back, the matana. Halacha Yudalit. Mi sheshalach kelim in Medinas Hayam. Someone finds himself in Medinas Hayam and he sends kelim to his family. Va'amar yinosnu elai lebonai. So these kelim should be given to my sons. So when it says the word lebonai literally means my sons, but we assume that it doesn't necessarily mean his sons. It means either his sons or his daughters. Even though he said the word bonai, we assume that it means my children. And therefore, harelu yinosnu lebonim u'lebonis. They should be given side to his sons and side to his daughters. Haroy lebonim, those things that are appropriate for sons, gain svarim u'klei mulchama. So those are the things that go to the lebonim. And v'haroy lebonis, those things that are appropriate for a bonis, ki gain klei meshi atzvuyim v'chalizov. In other words, silk, colored silk clothes or garments, or v'chalizov, which is like jewelry, is yitl mabonis. Now, hayu ru'uyim l'scharim u'lekevis, something that can be used either by scharim or nekevis. In other words, it's not svarim and it's not klei meshi. It's something which is a regular item. So mele is yitlu esim ascharim. So we assume that he meant it for the sons. V'chein ha'mishaleach kelim lebeisi stam. He didn't say yitnu l'bonim. He's sending kelim to his house. V'lei hayu b'em kelim haruyim l'bonis. And they weren't. I'm sorry. The person sends kalim to his house, and they were kalim that were roy for bonis, for daughters. Those things that were roy for women. Is the din is yitl deisum deisav. So his daughter should take it. Why? Because dasu shalehen shalach bepashas. Who is he sending it to? He didn't say who he's sending it to, but the pashas he's sending it to his daughters. However, if he doesn't have any daughters, or his daughters were married, so then yitlu eisa neshei bonov. Shadas neita shalehen shalach. Now we learned before that when a person sends a present, and he says for my children, so whatever is roy for boys, so the sons take. Whatever is roy for the daughters take. Now what happens if it's roy for both? So we assume the imdan das was for his sons. Over here, he's sending items which could be used by women. It could be used by women. So the din is azay. If he has daughters that live in the house, so bepashas he was sending for his daughters. Masha'inkin, if he doesn't have any daughters that are living in the house, his daughters are married, but he also has sons which are married to women. So the question is really, his daughters are married, so they really should be supported by by their husbands. Now he has sons, which l'chura they should support their wives. So Memela, when he's sending it, since we said before that a person would rather send it to his son than to his daughter, so when we're sending an item which could be used by a woman, so we assume that he's sending it to his son to give to his wife, rather than sending it to his daughter, which really should be taken care of by her husband. So if the daughter is at home, so then we assume he's sending it to his daughters. But if his daughter is married, so then we assume he's sending it rather to his daughter-in-law than to his daughter, because his daughter-in-law should be the responsibility of his son. So by sending it to his daughter-in-law, he's basically helping his son. Masha'inkin, by sending it to his daughter, he's basically helping his son-in-law. His son-in-law should be supporting his daughter-in-law, his daughter. So Memela, we assume that he's sending it to his daughter. Halacha tezvav. It's come b'hamsha that there's certain things that we assume umden das, even though he didn't say it clearly. Hamasi b'noi gadol l'psula babayis. Person is marrying off his son, his oldest son, to a psula, to a woman to someone that wasn't married before. Babayis in a house. In other words, the father owns a house. He's marrying off his son to a psula in a bais. So the din is kana habayis. So we assume that the father wants to gift this house to the son, and therefore the son owns the house. Vahu, that's only on the condition she'iyu nesuyin rishenim lezeh ben, that this should be for this son, it should be his first marriage, and also for the father, v'lihisi av ben acher kedem. This is the first child that the father is marrying off. That's another condition. And second and thirdly, v'lishir av b'zeh abayis sheyichad leklum. Whereas the bias was completely given over for the marriage of the son, there's nothing in that house that the father owns. That the father says, this is something something of mine that I'm being miyachid for myself. So Memela, three conditions. This is the first marriage of the son. This is the first marriage of the son. It's also the first time the father is marrying off his son. And also there's nothing left here in the house that the father was miyachid for himself. Sheyichid leklum. Udvarim elu kahalacha she'ein lem tamhu. It's like halacha Chazal instituted it. The Rambam saying it goes into the together of dvarim she'ein lem tam. Al derech we had b'negei maimet shloshtam. V'nogu chacham b'dover zeh mi'umden das. In other words, the chacham used this as a umden das. In other words, they assess the person's das. Shemereiv simchosei v'avosei, because of his great simcha and his ava for his son, is gomar v'hikno habayis. There was a gemiras das that he wants to be makdim the house. He didn't leave anything in this house for himself. In other words, the house was completely designated for the son's marriage, and there was nothing else in the house other than for the son. If lepel, the father left over even one jug, is like kan habayis, because lepel, there's this jug that's his. In other words, he didn't give over the entire house to the son. Now, yichad lebayis u'klei bayis, he designated for him for the wedding that he should have a house, and this is the klei bayis for the son. Is aval pi sheshir bebayis kli echad lasmi. In the house, we left over, the father left over a jug for himself, and therefore, as a result of that, he's not being makned the bayis to the son. He had even more. There was a whole storage place in the house, which was for the father. Is kana klei abayis, aval abayis lekana. So there's another din here, that when a person designates a house for his son to get married, in that house there is the klei bayis, which is designated for the son. So normally we say if there's nothing left in the house, and it fits all the conditions, that it's the ben hagadol that's marrying a psula, and he never married her, he never got married before, the father never married off before. So then the din is that he gets the house. He gets the house and also all the kelim which are in the house, which are designated for this marriage. Masha'in kain, if there's something else in the house that's still for the father still left a certain rights in this house, he even has one jug in the house, so that causes that the house shouldn't be the son's. But on the other end, the klei habayis, which was designated for the son, that is the son. Is memela kana klei habayis, aval habayis lekana. Now yichad lebayis v'aliyah. So this house wasn't only a house; it also had an upper floor. So the din is bayis kana. He's kind of the house. That was where he designated the house for the wedding. So Mele is kind of the house. But aliyah lekana, he's not kind of the upper floor. V'cheinem yichad lebayis v'aksadra. he was miyachid a bayis, and that bayis also has an aksadra. Aksadra is like a porch area outside the house, which has a roof and it's supported by beams. So the din is bayis kana. He's kind of the bayis because that was the din. That was we learned before that he got married in the house and he was miyachid the house. Aber aksadra lekana. Now shnei batim zel lifnim mizeh. He gave him a house, and that house had really two houses, two rooms, one in the other. Is lekana elo echad shenasabei, the place where the marriage actually took place. That's considered the house that he designated for the wedding. Masha'in in the other room, even though it was a room that's adjacent to this room, but that's not considered part of the house that was designated for the wedding, because that's not where the Nisuyin took place, and therefore only the house where the Nisuyin took place is the house which the son, you're gifting to we assume that he's gifting to the son, but not the other house. So B'kitzur, it's only Koil of the house, if there's nothing that the father has in the house, if there's something that the father has in the house. So then it doesn't include the house, but it does include the Kalim, which he was miyachid to the marriage. If there's a house plus a upper floor, so it's only the house, not the upper floor. If there's a house plus an aksadra, it's only the house and not the aksadra. If there's a house plus an inner room in the house, it's only referring to the house where the wedding took place and not the adjacent room. Halacha Yud Zayin. Kvar bi'arnu b'nesuyin. We learned already in Hilchis Ishu says this. Sheshnayim shehoyu b'neim shiduchim. There were two people that made up already to get married. Upasik zayid they bnei v'zayid they bita. And the mechutanim committed themselves, one for their son and one for their daughter. V'amru, kama atanesin lebincha. How much are you willing to give dowry? This is not for your son in order to help him out in the marriage. Kach v'kach. V'kama atanesin lebitcha. And how the father of the daughter of the one that's getting married. How much are you giving? So he said, kach v'kach. V'omdu v'kitcher, right behemshech, to this type of talk. They went ahead and they were mekadosh. The chassan was mekadosh the kala. So the din is kanu b'amira. So that's our ma'isa kinyan. Even though normally, when a person just commits himself to give a present, that's not really a proper commitment. But over here, in such circumstances, it's kanu b'amira. Ve'ein kainan b'amira zu. But this amira is not going to be kaina at shas nesuyin. In other words, you're not going to, right now is only erisin. Until Shas Nesuyin, you're not committed to give the money. Shekola Poisig, when a person makes up to give money, is Daite Lichnis. The Das is only that once the Nesuyin is going to take place, that's when he's going to give the money. But Lepel, it's a commitment. So Sai, the father of the Chasna has to pay the money, and Sai, the father of the Kala, pay the money. Utzrichim shiyu advarim sheim peiskim mitzuyim b'shusei. Whereas when they commit themselves to give something, what they're giving has to be motzi b'shusei. She'eino the makne dover shlei bo leilam k'mesha b'yarnu. However, udvarim elu ein lei nitnu likasa. Normally, when there's a din, when a person commits himself, much with a kinyan, so the din is when you commit yourself with a kinyan, you could write a star on this commitment. That's a kinyan is nitnu likasif. This hakno, where a person commits himself to give something, doesn't have a din that you could write a star of this commitment. And lefichach einen kishtar ashayitrif mem. Whereas if there would be a star, so then the person that has the star knows you committed yourself, so there could be even, you could be teirif even from the lekuchas. In other words, you committed yourself to a certain amount, and lepel, you didn't give it, you had that money, you didn't give it, so you could be teirif even from lekuchas if there was a star. Masha'inkin over here, we're saying that this is not, this commitment doesn't have a din that's nitnuli kosev. Whereas if you said that it should be nitnuli kosev, it should be written a star, so you could write a star. No, but the question is, normally a kinyan is nitnuli kosev. Masha'inkin over here, this kinyan is not, this is not really a maisa kinyan, it was just a maisa amira. And it's a chidush that it's dvarim which is niknan b'amira. So this dvarim on niknan b'amira is not enough that you should actually write a star on this akno. Halacha Yudches. HaMekadesh so isha. Afilu kitcha be'elev dinner. He gave 11 dinner for the kedushin. Ben shechazra he, ben shechazar hu. Whether later on he decided that he doesn't want to continue with the marriage, he wants to give her a get, or she decided she doesn't want to continue with the marriage. Ben shemesu, ben shemesehi. Whether he died or she died, so obviously it never came from kedushin to nesuyin. So the money that he gave for the kedushin is not chezer. You can't say, listen, I married you, now I'm giving you a divorce. So it comes out of Mafreya, I wasn't really interested in such a marriage. Whatever the divorce entails. In other words, if there's a chiyuv ksuba, there's no chiyuv ksuba, that's a separate issue. But the question is, what about the mois kedushin? The mois kedushin is not chayzer. In other words, when a person marries a woman and the kedushin was chal, so even though later on he divorces her, later on she wants a divorce, either way, he dies, she dies, but lepel, the kedushin was chal, at that point in time, the money became hers. It's considered a matana which you can't take back. But if the kedushin was a mistake, in other words, he thought one thing and lepel she was something else, and Mamela comes out that it was mekach tois, so Mamela is chayz na mois, so then the mois is chayz, because lepel, it was kedushin tois, so the whole kedushin was never chal. When a person marries a sister, and lepel, a sister, there's no chal kedushin. Kedushin is not tefsim in arayas. She's isakoris. Any isakoris, there's no tfisas kedushin. Is amois matana. Why? Because adam yedei shein kedushin tefsim barayas. A person knows that kedushin is not tefsim barayas, and everyone knows that aches is arayas. He was really giving his sister a present. And for whatever reason, he decided to say Arayat Mekudeshesli. But Lepel, we don't assume that he was really giving it to her Almanas, that it should be a Kedushin. Lepel, it's not a Kedushin, so Meli should get the money back. He knew that this money wasn't a Kedushin. Halacha Chafalef. Hashiliach Savlenis L'beis Chomiv. Someone sends presents to a Shver's house. In other words, his wife is an Arusi. He was Mekadesher. Lepel, there was no Nesuyin yet. She's still at home. And he's sending Savlenis. Whether he's sending a large amount of presents or a small amount of presents, whether he ate there was a suda for the erison and he ate there, or he didn't eat there. Now, after he sent these presents, he died, or she died, or he changed his mind and he doesn't want to continue with the nesuin. So the question is, what's with those presents? Do those presents come back? In other words, he didn't send it to her really just for the erison. He sent it to her because he's marrying her. Lepel, he didn't end up marrying her. So the din is Yachzur HaSivlenis Kula. So those Sivlenis go back because Lepel, he had no intention of giving it Stamazet, and Chutz Min HaMeichel V'Hameshke, except for food and drink. So Lepel, the Rambam brings over from Pirsha Mishnayos that Chutz from Meichel V'Hameshke means that was drunk, that was eaten already, or drunk already. In other words, if the food and drink are still there, so they also go back. In other words, Michael Amashka means if he sent food items and they were already eaten or drunk, they drank them already, so then you don't ask them back to reimburse you for it. But if the item is still originally available, so then you do get it back. And al dereza, in other words, the chilik is not Michael or not Michael. The chilik is beikar whether it was used or not used. The part that was used, you don't have to reimburse. The part that wasn't used has to be given back. The Ram doesn't say clearly that. The Ram says the chiluk between food and not food. And then halacha chav beis v'chein kelim mu'atim shesholach lo lishtamish on the beis avia. He sent her certain items to use beis avia. Is in nishtamsh bo if she used it. Ubalu avdu is also ein mishtam. They don't have to be paid. So it could be the word is not kelim mu'atim. In other words, if it's kelim mu'atim, so memela they were balu ein nishtamshu. In other words, he sent her an item which is just used, and memela once they're used, there's nothing to give back. Avalim hoyu kayam. If these items are still there, so bepashtus, if it would be kelim arubim, so it would always be there. So it would be kelim there. Oyim hoyu kayam is chezer akel v'geve esim bebezin. Shadavi yadua shalishol ela derech noibulvat. A person sends these as niceness. He wants to be nice, and he only wants it for the eventuality of them getting married. Mashenkin, if they don't get married, so therefore he had no intention of giving this and gifting it. So l'chura, the nekudas advarim is that if the presents are still kayam, so then he could take it back. And if they're not kayam, if they were eaten already, or they were used already, so then you can't take it back. Halacha chav gimel. Now chazra hiba. This is talking about when he changed his mind. He knows he doesn't want the marriage. What happens if she changed her mind, and she doesn't want to get married? So then chayzer akil. Now everything goes back. Vafilo hamaychel b'amashke, even the food and drink which was eaten already, is nisenes dom of bezel. So she has to pay back for the food and drink that he sent there, and they were eaten already or drunk already. She has to send it back. Ukvar eskimu ageinim. If the the price for it was 6, is mishtalemes arboim chazerba. So then she only pays 2/3. She pays 2/3 of the normal price. Shelinosin lamatana zu el leda sheli tazba. Since we assume that he didn't give this present only al das, that she's not going to have charata in the wedding, and lepel, since she did have charata, so therefore she has to reimburse him. So obviously these civilians have to go back this pashut. That would be even if he changed his mind. But over here the chiddush is that if she changed her mind, even the stuff that's not there anymore, so she has to reimburse him, but she doesn't have to reimburse him mamish its original value at a cheap, as a reduced value, which is only 2/3 from its original value. Halacha chavdalad heirer abesei shem hoye minig amedina sheyasa kol adam suda v'yachal reyav eichalik mois l'shamoshim u'lechazonim u'kiyetzibam. That when a person gets married, a person becomes a person is mekadosh isha, so he makes a party, and with his friends, and gives money to various different people. V'asa kedera she'esin kolam, and lepele v'chazir, and then she was chayzer from the marriage. In other words, she went ahead and said she doesn't want to get married. So the din is mishalem sakel. She has to pay for all his losses. Whereas he went ahead and made a suda, and he gave food and drink to his friends. He also gave out different monies to different people, to shamoshim and chazonim. So this was all because of the marriage. And lepel, she changed her mind. Shari gorma le'la'abid momen, and v'cholagerim la'abid momen chaverim mishalem. Abavu she only edim kama etze. She has to have edim to prove how much he spent for these parties or for giving out these money. He can't be just nishba v'netel. He has to prove that this is the amount of money that he spent as a result of this wedding. In other words, it wasn't the wedding. This was all in the erisin. In other words, he was ma'ariser, and then he went ahead and made a party, and then he went ahead and gave out distributions. So the din is she has to reimburse him for all his losses.